and Louise will not be with us.
Okay. You can start, Joe.
You have all the roll?
I do.
Okay. Has anybody received any communication from DEEP in regards to anything that we've been going over the last few months?
No.
Jeff?
The Harbor Commission hasn't.
Okay. Dick, have you gotten
We've
anything
talked with-
from Deep? You're muted, Dick.
About now,
You're good.
okay, we did run a test on a cyclopure. And we did that by doing the playing field surrounding area of the new Norwalk fields over. And found out that the cyclopure comes in about 2/3 the value of what we were getting from York Laboratories. Now, we haven't done enough work to really nail that down. But the nice part, as you know, with cyclopure is they're $79 a test, and that includes everything. It includes postage, processing, the whole deal. And they get back to you in about 4 days, but York does the same. And York has the added advantage of picking up your samples and redelivering the data within 4 or 5 days. Price to $295 versus $79. It's quite a big spread. So, by the way, we did several of the York tests over and found out they compared very favorably what we got from them the first time. So
So
That was
there's
good.
consistency. Okay, Department of Aquaculture. Steve's not on. Jeff, did you hear anything from them?
Well, I was going to say, even though we haven't received any communications or written communications from DEEP, we do talk with the regulatory people, regularly, to discuss the status of for example, the Eversource application, and also we've been having discussions concerning the Harbor Masters Authority. And then recently with the Bureau of Aquaculture, we've been discussing the need for permit conditions in the Harbor Masters mooring permits that will be issued through the DOT. Permit conditions to make clear that if there is damage to shellfish beds as a result of the use of those commercial barge mooring applications, then the permittee will be responsible. But we're trying to work out the details of that now. But the Bureau of Aquaculture is supportive of that. But that's the only communication that I've had with them. Nothing to do with water quality testing or the current status of shellfish resources.
Okay, along the lines of more communication from them. While I was at the beach the other day, I ran into 2 people from aquaculture. And I had talked to Jeff earlier, and then Jeff emailed me a document from aquaculture, and it was in regards to Vibrio. I asked them specifically what's going on, because apparently the Department of Health issued a warning about shellfish and getting Vibrio, and 1 person died from it and 2 people had infections from it. And when the Department of Aquaculture did more research, it did not involve any shellfish from Connecticut. And the person that died had eaten shellfish from another state in another restaurant outside of this state. The people that got an infection had been wading through the water, and both the people had open sores on their legs. So the infection got into the open sore, and that's how they became infected with it. And they issued a statement. And Jeff, do you think you can get that out to everybody here today?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm not, again, in front of the computer, but I will tonight. But I'm
Right.
assuming, Joe, that that statement was sent because of the conversation you had with.
Well, I had
you know,
I had
aquaculture
requested it,
people.
yes.
Yeah, because it came out right after, it came out later that day,
Yep,
qualifying, just saying what you just said. I'll send that later tonight.
I appreciate it. And I had asked Bill if they had done anything with that, and Bill said no. So, Bill, do you have anything else from the Department of Health we need to worry about?
No, the Vibrio scare being what it was, just not in the area. But we were monitoring to see if we had anybody in Norwich that might be an issue with it, but obviously that was not going to be the case. Aside from that, the beach sampling this week was great. Everything came back nice and clean, all 15 sites.
Good. Any reports of swimmer's itch here?
No, not yet. I did see there was some elsewhere, but not yet. No, I'm waiting for the call, but as of now, no.
Okay, because Greenwich apparently has had a few issues with that. And it usually starts in Greenwich and works its way up into cooler waters. Jeff, anything from the Harbor Commission that we need to know about?
You know, the big projects that the commission is working on, including now about to send out a request for proposals for engineering and design assistance for the street end access study. There'll be a meeting about that next week in the city hall prior to sending out a request for proposals. You know what the comments were, the recommendations concerning the Eversource permit application. The other matter I mentioned, that the harbor master is now reviewing the placement of the DOT commercial mooring anchors and working on proper conditions to include for the use of those. And then the other major project has to do with the rezoning project and the amendment to the plan of conservation and development. And I think the first thing that we'll need to, and probably have to review this at the August meeting, we received a referral from the Planning and Zoning Department of the proposed amendment to the plan of conservation and development. And that's the actual language of the amendment is very simple. It's that it's to, I may have off, but it's to amend the POCD to support the implementation of the waterfront industrial zoning study, which is quite a large report. So it is to amend the POCD by referencing and supporting the implementation of that separate study, and that's necessary in order to change to go through with the zoning changes, which would be a separate action later on. But the zoning has to be consistent with the POCD. So the first thing they need to do is amend the POCD. And of course, the principal area of concern, or a principal area of concern, Harbor Management Commission, is the disposition, or what's being proposed for the Water Street area, the marine commercial area. And as we know, the proposed zoning would eliminate half of the marine commercial district and replace that with what's called a urban density mixed use district. And also, based on our understanding of that waterfront industrial zones study, that also provides for increasing the allowable development density in the remaining marine commercial district. So there's a lot of interesting coastal management related, and we talked about this at the last meeting. And of course, that this has to be balanced against the goals for resiliency and proper floodplain management. As we know, all of that Water Street area that's within the marine commercial district and would be within the new mixed use urban density development district, that's all in the special flood hazard area, or the otherwise known as the 100-year floodplain. So that's what we're going to be reviewing at the next meeting. That referral also was sent to the Commissioner of DEP for comments relative to the coastal management, the state's coastal management act. So that's a real significant, for the reasons we talked about last month. probably forgot something, some things we're working on, but those seem to be the main ones. Thanks for letting me go on about that.
Okay, Jeff, I don't know if you know it or anybody else in the group. If you drove by the aquarium and headed north to Reed Street, they are already starting to do work on the marsh by Oyster Shell Park. I saw the steam shovel out there today, and guys were surveying it and setting up to do some removal of Phragmites. And that's what their plan is. But I didn't actually see them remove anything. I just saw everything being set up. So they did have,
And that was-
they did
I
have,
didn't mean to interrupt you.
they did have flotation devices around. I don't know if anything was under the flotation device to minimize sediments drifting downstream. Hopefully tomorrow I can take some time and go down there and get a better look at it and see what's going on.
And that would be part of the Walk Bridge project,
Yes.
the mitigation requirement for wetland restoration.
Yes, Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. I haven't gone down to look at that. I will.
yeah. And also along those lines, when the Harbor Commission met the last time, which was just a little over a week ago, I reported on the water quality at that time. And the most scary thing at that point was the water temperature in the harbor by the aquarium was 78 degrees. And the dissolved oxygen was 0.1. And that was both on the surface and the bottom. So it was, I sent a note to the Harbor Commission saying, yeah, if we don't have dead fish, it's a miracle because they should be dying with oxygen levels that low. But the other thing is we have not had huge schools going up the river like we have had in the past. So we were spared so far this year. I did not look at the temperature today, but it was cooler yesterday. Okay, anything from planning and zoning? No. Dick, do you have anything for us? Other than what you gave us on the PFAS testing?
Well, only that I talked to Ralph, and they finally got around to sending out a report on the study of the effluent, the influent, and the sludge for PFAS. They made 2 passes at it, and they put out a report in a 1,600-page volume from DEEP. And Ralph has routed that over to me. I've got to wade through it and find out, because every sewage treatment plant in the state has a page as to how they made out. And according to Ralph, at least on PFAS and PFOA, their numbers came in about 2 points higher than what the water districts are supposed to be doing, which, if that's true, shows that at least the water districts are trying to get to 10 parts per trillion on PFOA, OS, and 16 parts per trillion on PFOA. Those are the numbers that came through on the effluent. But again, I have to see the report, 1,600 pages long.
What's interesting about that, Dick, is that water that gets to that plant isn't just from city water.
It's a variety of things.
Yeah. So it could be coming from wells that may have submerged deposits of that.
Ralph also shared a memo with me showing the grades of PFAS that they're finding in the effluent, and they match almost exactly what we're seeing in the river. And to that end, I've tried to get a hold of Trout Unlimited to at least advise them what we're finding, because my guess is the state will sooner or later test the Norwalk River, and they're going to put an advisory on fish. It's only a matter of time. And I thought I'd give him a heads up, but he hasn't returned calls, so that's where we are.
DEEP did put an advisory out on several rivers, but not the Norwalk River. And it was with bass.
Oh, no, it's a variety of fish. It's eels, it's trout, it's bass. Each river seems to have its own fingerprint.
Yep. But the primary thing that DEEP put out on the internet was targeting bass. And the Norwalk River is not famous for its bass population.
No, but
Yeah,
Add some trout, I would guess.
yes. So I think, and I hope Trout Unlimited gets involved with that.
They should.
Yeah. Okay, next item, DPW plant, treatment plant tour has been canceled. Ralph did not want to conduct a tour with only 3 or 4 people, and that's all that signed up for it. And that's not only with us, but also the Harbor Commission, and he opened it up to other people in the government. Okay, under old business, Diane, you sent around a directory. I did not get time to send that out to everybody. Did you send it out to everybody?
Yes, it's just a draft outline. It's not the directory. I can report that this is becoming a bit more complicated because, of course, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. I had a discussion with Bill Mooney
Yep.
a day or 2 ago, and some others. I've been just doing kind of an informal. I looked at, of course, the city organizational chart, and I'm very familiar with Norwalk's government. So any possible entity or department that might have some role in water quality management and or enforcement, I reviewed online or I spoke with. I'm in the process of I'm almost done speaking with people that are involved with the process of taking in concerns or complaints. And there's a wide gamut. The website is not very easy to explore. I'm just used to it being a challenge. One of the benefits, if and when we finish a directory, would be, I think, to make sure it is in a proper place on the city website. I have heard rumors that the intent of city council and the mayor's office is to improve the website to make it more user friendly. It's problematic. Almost everyone on the council seems to believe this, and so I'm hoping they will take a look. But nevertheless, when this exercise of a directory is finished, I am hoping it will be finished definitely by the end of the year, if not September, October, but just the draft for all of you to review, and Bill Mooney, then whatever we come up with, I'm not even sure the Water Quality Committee has a website or a page on the city website. So maybe it would be under the mayor's office. It could be under, we could have some role in suggesting where it would go, but it would be helpful for the public. Customer service is seen as the main. I did send this to everyone to answer your question, and customer service, which is 854-3200. They have 2 or 3 people on, but what I'm consistently asking is, okay, when it's after hours or weekends or holidays, what is the process? Because that's very important. A lot of times things happen when the government is not in their offices, could happen. So that would allow the public and officials, they'd know who to contact. I'm in the process. I put in calls, but haven't received return yet for the police combined dispatch and the fire department, who play major role. And on the city website, there is nothing I could find that says Marine Police, which I found kind of odd. So I'm trying to fill in those blanks. We have a Marine Police Division, but it's not listed under police. And if any of you know where it is located on the website, that would be great. I know how to find the phone numbers and that sort of thing.
Okay. And Diane, just to reinforce your point, earlier in the spring, my wife and I were driving on a road here in town, that had just been recently paved. And it had been recently paved after after the city had done work on the water main. And through this beautiful paved road, water was shooting up through the road, and it took me 2 hours before I could get a hold of somebody in City Hall to point that out, and said, you may want to get there before there's a huge crater there and it becomes more of a problem. So it's not an understated issue. It's something that they should have an emergency number to call for the consumer type person. Okay, anything else with that, Diane?
Just that one thing that was very useful when I was a regulator in the 80s with the Hazardous Waste Division at DEEP, then it was called DEP, DEP, and that is the possibility of taking anonymous complaints. Bill Mooney told me that they do in the health department, but in the zoning department, some years they do, other years they don't. So I'm just trying to find out whether any of these enforcement entities take anonymous complaints. I think it's very important to have a system where anonymous complaints can be filed to protect the complainant. And in DEEP, we had a system. It was a system that was developed. So long story short is that Michelle Matthews Woods is now in charge of the customer service department. It used to be under DPW. They moved that. And so I have a call in to speak with her. And she is the mayor's communications director. So anyway, it's just gotten a little more complicated than I thought, but I do think, long story short, is that it could serve as an educational tool and help with getting any concerns handled quickly. I think the city currently has a system. They have systems in place. It's just not clear sometimes as to what a layman would do. But I want to lastly say that the health department website, which I added to my outline report there that I sent just a little while ago, it includes the health department's website. They have a page for water quality, and in that there is a link to each of the water utilities. So in the case of a water main break, usually the customers on that water main who don't have water anymore, have brown water, they'll call right away. But your point is well taken. So if it's a sewer main or a water main, should be pretty easy. I'm assuming in holidays and evenings and stuff, the fire department, the combined dispatch would hopefully know who to call, but again, they may not. And so the last thing is on anyone's complaint forms or intake forms, we'll talk about in coming meetings whether we think, based on all of our experience and training, that it may be good to have some more specific questions to ask a complainant or someone observing that could help them get to the bottom of it. You know, things that you typically see with water quality related items instead of just general complaints.
Excellent. Okay, Dick, you already talked about the PFAS future testing comparison with the less expensive tests. With the expensive test versus the less expensive test. And from what I gather, you're going to continue this to a certain point.
Oh, definitely. We're not in a position to make a definitive answer on that, but that's the early indications.
Okay,
One other thing,
go ahead.
Joe, I would go ahead. I don't
No.
cut you off. I had a long discussion with Ralph, and I don't know whether you guys knew this or not. He was anticipating a call from Save the Sound. Roger Reynolds, Bill Lucy, and their chemical guy, whoever, was going to come down and question them closely about the consent order. Well, when they showed up, the interest wasn't so much on the outfall that's across from the plant. The interest was on number 2 discharge. And if you remember the plant layout, water that overflows the capacity gets primary treatment, and then it gets routed around to a tank where it is chlorinated coming in and adjusted to chlorine on the way out. And they just spent $1 million to get that second feature in there, so that what comes out of that tank is conducive to what is needed for residual in the river. And it should be a lot safer. Well, the thing is that now that's become a key point of interest on the consent order. Ralph said they've already turned in engineering plans to make some corrections on it. And in June, it went to the DEP, and God knows how many months it'll be before they get an answer. But the thing is, they're looking upstream to cut off sources so they don't have an overflow situation. It only happens now about 4 times a year, but he says we want to try to cut it down to 2 times a year or 1 time a year. And he says that's kind of the focus of the whole thing right now. And he took Roger Reynolds and Bill Lucy and gave them the Cook's tour of the plant, and everybody was satisfied and left. So I think that that meeting didn't turn out to what everybody thought it was going to be.
Okay, excellent. Appreciate that. Okay, B, potential zoning changes. Jeff, are you still on?
Yes, Joe.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well,
I'd like you to weigh in on this.
Well, as I mentioned, the proposed zoning changes have generated quite a bit of interest throughout the city. So far, the principal interest that I've read about has to do with the changes to the residential zones. However, the Harbor Commission has quite an interest in the waterfront rezoning. And I think, as I mentioned before, the procedure or the process that's being followed, as best as we understand, first requires an amendment of the POCD, as I mentioned, to support the recommendations in that waterfront industrial study, because in order to the zoning has to be consistent with the POCD. And you remember, it's sort of interesting, when the POCD was the POCD was amended comprehensively back in 2019, and the Harbor Commission submitted, a good bit of material, including what we call the Coastal Vision, which talked about the Municipal Coastal Program and the Coastal Management Act and the goals for the waterfront and the harbor. And at that time, you remember that the first early proposal for the POCD, the comprehensive amendment, included elimination of the marine commercial district in terms of a land use district that would be established in the POCD. If you recall, the first proposal was to replace the marine commercial district with a general commercial district along Water Street, and the Harbor Commission objected to that, and that proposal wasn't implemented. So now to change the zoning or to amend the zoning on the waterfront, they first have to change the POCD. Now, we did have a presentation from Planning and Zoning of the proposed zoning. And of course, I say we, the Harbor Commission and the Shellfish Commission, it was a joint meeting. And what we learned is that what I mentioned before is that the top northern half of the marine commercial district along Water Street would be replaced with a I forget the acronym or the letters of the zoning district, but it would be a mixed use urban density district, urban density redevelopment district. And part of the argument for that, as planning and zoning officials said, was that's nearby the train station. So they're trying to increase the residential, not increase, but provide additional residential opportunities nearby the train station. And that's part of the transit-oriented goals. But of course, there are issues associated with that we pointed out, including the fact that that area is within the 100-year floodplain and floods often. As you know, there was a tremendous high water level back in December of last year, and at the same time, there's the resiliency work that's ongoing. So how do you balance those two, what seem to be quite competing goals? Resiliency on the one hand, and the goal for increasing development on the other. And the planning official said that these properties are of significant value in terms of their redevelopment for the city of Norwalk. And that was, we would interpret that as the principal reason for proposing what they're proposing there. And as I mentioned before, reading the waterfront industrial study, the appendices have different development scenarios. So they call them test fits. And the best I can understand, maybe I'm not smart enough to understand everything, it's quite complicated, is that there's also the opportunity to increase the development density on the remaining marine commercial area on the south. So that's another matter. But in addition, the area in the upper part of the harbor, on the western side, going up north of King Industries, forget where it begins, and up to and including Divine Brothers, that would also be rezoned to the urban density mixed use district. And that area also is within the 100-year floodplain. So those are two examples. And across between the bridges, between the Walk Bridge and the Scarpolino Bridge, on the east side, where the old Sono Wharf Marina used to be, that would also be part of the urban density mixed-use redevelopment zone, which would require provisions for public access and some sort of water-dependent use, but it would also allow that increased residential density. So those are summarize but right now. The matter before the Harbor Commission is the proposed change of the POCD, which is necessary in order to move these zoning changes ahead. Now, also we asked the P&Z officials what they were proposing to do with Manresa Island, and the answer was, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that they're not proposing to do anything with the change the zone now, the existing zone of that now. But when there may be some proposal in the future, then some consideration might be made to changing the zone. But the big issues, and repeating from what we said last month, but it's important to a lot of us, is the impact of the rezoning on the marine commercial district, and the obvious conflict between goals for increasing development and goals for wise floodplain management and resiliency. So hopefully these will be worked out in a thoughtful way, in a way that best serves the public interest and the public health, safety, and welfare, because that's the purpose of zoning regulations. But anyway, that's my sound like a know-it-all, but that's my summary of the zoning stuff, Joe. Sorry to go on so long.
Thanks, Jeff. And as a point of reference, years ago when I was teaching an environmental studies class, we always did coastal management. And it was in, I think, 72 or 73, we attended a city planning commission that was held in City Hall, and they had a chart showing the development of the Norwalk Harbor. And that chart way back in the 70s showed development completely around the harbor without any regard for flooding or anything else. And I can remember one of my juniors saying to me, and you can imagine the language that came out in an inner city school, "Are you blanking nuts?" And the people said the same thing we're hearing that the land is too valuable and we got to put people there, which is too bad. Other states and other communities that have property on the water basically have said, we won't contribute to flood insurance. And I think it's Washington right now. If a property floods, the city or the community has a right to go and give the person taken over by eminent domain, pay them for eminent domain, and then that property is turned into parkland and open space. And I'm fortunate to have a student that actually is doing that for part of her job. So I said, how's that going? And she's there. Some people are happy about it, but there's a lot of people that are very upset over it. But basically, they stopped wanting to pay for flood insurance. Diane?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for your review. For the zone changes, it is not too late to send comments in writing to the planning and zoning staff, because after every planning and zoning public meeting, like last night, although that evening went so late, they really didn't talk about it that much. They're still in the process of doing research, having the staff do research and discussing the progress of the rewrite of the planning and of the zoning regulations. On the issue of the industrial waterfront zone study, it was in the process where it was approved by the city council community economic development committee, and then they put that before the general council, and they voted yes. I believe then it's being sent back to the planning and zoning department, and also it's with the Harbor Commission. So Jeff, I want to speak with you and Alan Kibbe, because there are some errors in that study. Now either they there's some errors that either were due to a lack of proper research, or they decided to delete certain things, but they are errors of omission in that particular study. It has to do with contaminated properties. And so I sent an email on my own as a citizen to Jessica Vanacek, because it's important that these studies, especially when we hire consultants at great expense to the residents and the businesses that who pays for it, that they be accurate. And the industrial waterfront, it's not easy to read. There are these test kits. Some of the test kits contain false information. So on both sides of the harbor. And, as an example, I stated that there are brownfields on both sides of the harbor. One example is the old Yankee gasification plant, which is off of Harbor Avenue. And Eversource and Yankee Gas recombine themselves, and they'll probably never develop that site. And because there's coal tar underlaying that entire site due to the process of turning coal into gas back in the turn of the century. And that is considered that's called a brownfield. The industrial waterfront stated there are no brownfields in the entire area. And that is just false. I know that professionally and as a citizen advocate. So I guess they're scrambling to try to figure out why that language was allowed, but the council, rather than tabling their vote, they decided to vote yes, which I was quite disappointed. So anyway, it's still a work in progress, but I do think the Harbor Commission can tell them to change the language in the report because the harbor commissioners know that there are brownfields in the study area. And I want to talk with you all about it.
Well, I might, and I'm sorry to interrupt if that's what I'm doing, but thank you for pointing that out. There are other aspects of the report too that are deserving of comments that we pointed out. But our understanding is that study has no value really, or I shouldn't say value, but the weight of that will be felt when the POCD is adopted to essentially support that or to support its recommendations. So what we're faced with now is yes, reviewing that proposed amendment to the POCD to implement that study, and that's the opportunity to point out any flaws in that study. And the other aspect of this review that I didn't mention before is that the DEEP has a review role in this. Now that the amendment to the POCD was referred to the Harbor Commission and to DEEP right before the last commission meeting. And there was a formal referral from the Planning and Zoning Department, and there was a reference to, I believe this is being referred with respect to section 8-23 or 24 of the general statutes, which is the Planning and Zoning statutes.
Yeah,
However,
8-24.
Yeah, however, as Deep pointed out, that's not the section that Deep will review this with respect to. Deep will review it with respect to, forget the relevant number of the section in the Coastal Management Act. So Deep has to review this because it affects the coastal area. And that provides a 35-day review period. It has to be referred to DEEP 35 days before any hearing or any decision on this is made. But the referral didn't include a date for a hearing. And DEEP is trying to find out what if a hearing has been set for this. So our working under the assumption that the commission has to consider this at its next meeting in order to have comments back before 35 days expire. But there's an awful lot to consider, and it's complex. And as I mentioned keep talking, but as I mentioned last month, back in the 1980s, it's almost like it's history repeating itself, and with the pressure for redevelopment of these properties. The added factor, though, is the floodplain location, because back in the 80s, the principal consideration that DEP had was the effect of the rezoning on water-dependent uses. The flood hazard and the risk and the vulnerability was not brought up significantly in the discussions. Now, with the increased understanding of sea level rise and the concerns about resiliency, that's another major consideration in looking at proposals that would increase residential density in the floodplain. And DEEP has as I mentioned, in Stanford, Stratford, and New Haven, DEEP has written letters to the Municipal Planning and Zoning Authority with respect to particular projects that DEEP's finding or position is that proposals that would increase residential density in the coastal floodplain are inconsistent with the Connecticut Coastal Management Act. So and DEEP also gave Planning and Zoning a heads up about that policy last year. So we'll see how it goes. But again, the purpose is to accomplish something in the end that serves the overall interests of the public and is related to the public health, safety, and welfare. So I'm sorry, but
Jeff,
as you can tell, it's quite interesting.
What is the deadline for the Harbor Commission to give comments to Planning and Zoning? And number two, can the Harbor Commission hold a public hearing? What would stop you guys and gals from holding a public hearing? Because the
answer to the first question is we don't know, but we're assuming because it was referred to it was formally referred to both the commission and the DEP. And that referral to the commission and to the DEP is with respect to a 35-day notice before a hearing or a decision. So that's what we'll have to clarify that. But as of now, we don't know that a hearing date has been set. But they've given us in effect 35 days notice. But they haven't set the hearing as far as we know. Now, as far as the planning and zoning hearing, as far as the Harbor Commission holding a public hearing, you wouldn't call it a public hearing because that's a legal term with respect to something that's being considered for adoption. But there's no reason that the commission couldn't have a public meeting to solicit public comments. Do you know what I mean? Because the commission isn't adopting anything. The commission is developing recommendations to transmit to the agency with the responsibility for adoption. That's the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Gotcha.
But whatever you call it, the commission could certainly announce a public meeting to hear comments on this. But that's something that will have to be discussed, a little sooner rather than later. But I know Deep was trying to find out if a hearing date had for this POCD amendment had been established. And when I talked with a Deep person Monday, they had not gotten an answer on that. They didn't have an answer to give us. We'll communicate with the planning and zoning to just confirm that. Remember, that's on the POCD amendment and on the waterfront, directly on the waterfront industrial study. That's not on the zoning. You haven't got a referral on the zoning yet. Thank you.
You're muted,
Sorry to
Joe.
Anything else on that? Okay, Diana, you're up next. You wanted an update on progress made on Connecticut DEEP sewer violations.
So,
I'm out of the loop on that, so. take
all
it
right.
away.
Okay, I did locate a Nancy on Norwalk article that describes the consent order. And it was, the city started talking with DEP in 2021, and they came to a consent agreement, but it is enforceable by April of last year, 2022. No one knew about it, really. We didn't know about it until I got a copy of the consent order, later in the year. So my question was, because I'm sure the city and Ralph Kolb has been working on this, as I think Dick Harris just mentioned. I was just interested in what the status was. In the consent order, there are two main targets or elements that the state wanted the city to show that they are planning to fix. One was the Ann Street siphon, which is of course in South Norwalk, as an emergency overflow. And the second was the treatment plant micro screens. Now, apparently, according to what Dick just said with this meeting with Save the Sound, there's a third thing, or maybe it's inclusive in the micro screens at the treatment plant. But I just wanted to know what progress has been made. Has there been money set aside in the capital budget and bonding? That's all I wanted to know. What is the status of that?
Well, as far as I can tell you, Diane, the plans have been submitted to make those corrections to the DEP back in June. And it may be quite a while before the DEP gets to it and comes back with a resolution. That's where the whole thing is. It's sort of in limbo right now.
Right. Well, I was hoping to speak with an official from the city, and not that you are not that you are not knowledgeable, of course, Dick, but you know, it's a way to have a relationship of this committee with the officials from DPW and or WPCA.
You know,
Um,
Diane, you had that issue. Ralph was ready to have all of you down there and go through the whole thing and nobody could do it.
Well, that's not me. I mean, I don't know why you're using that particular tone, but
Because
I
only 3 people
I
signed
was
up.
I was very happy that he extended that. I just asked a simple question. It has nothing to do with anything else. I just was interested, as I think we should be as a committee, on helping. Maybe they need help getting more money from the city. I mean, we're all in this together. We're a part of the Mayor's Water Quality Committee, and I was just asking for an update, that's all. And I think that we should find a way to have an update. And also, I mean, I put forth a question the other day. I was in a department store and I noticed all of these flushable wipes. I'm imagining it could be a problem in any sewage treatment plant, but this is the kind of thing that our committee could help. If you know, I just can't see how how people in general will differentiate between unflushable and flushable wipes once it's been allowed. And maybe we could do some kind of, in the future, education, work with the city and the communications person if Ralph Kolb and his people think this is a problem. So, you know, it's just one of those things that, you know, having a relationship with Ralph and others is important, I think, in a friendly, you know, mutually friendly way. They're part of the city, we're part of the city.
Diane, on more than one occasion, I've asked Ralph, and on more than one occasion, he's come up with the same answer. If you have questions, attend their committee meetings, and he'd be happy to answer the questions. But they won't come to our meetings. But we are welcome to go to theirs.
Well, I don't think necessarily that's mutually cooperative. I mean, it would just be a Zoom call for 5 minutes. Hi, how are you? Goodbye. So anyway, I'll chat with him. He's a friendly guy, good guy.
And moving
So
on,
just as a point of order,
go ahead.
just as a point of order, I just want to remind you, there's 5 minutes left to the meeting, that's all.
Thanks, Bill. And Diane, you had a request for a brief general discussion about current and future needs in regards to climate change, heat, and water quality.
I could wait till next month. We could serve as because we have such wonderful members of this committee with specialties like Dick, and all of is the effects of heat and climate mostly for the layman, for the public, and to help the city if possible, but mainly as a public education service, with working with the city's communication person. Maybe that would be, I think that could be useful. We know that there could be an increased beach closures. There could be more fish kills. It could cause more problems in the water, possibly. Not that that's the sort of, just as a public education service. So think about it for the future.
Excellent. We have a few minutes for public comments. Does anybody out there in the public wish to pipe in?
I see no one raising their hands at this point.
Excellent. Did anybody get a chance to, I hope you all got a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting?
One small correction, Joe.
Go ahead.
They talked about the Wilton athletic field being turned down by 4 people. It was 49 that
Okay.
voted it down.
And also under the Department of Health, Dick did pick up a sample, not from Milford Waters. He took the sample to Milford containing the red algae. And I sent a note to Diana, because what Dick found was it was Progostromium minimum, which is a hazardous algae bloom. And my concern was the fact that I ran into 2 dog walkers over at Taylor Farms, and they both complained their dogs had been swimming and got violently ill within 24 hours. And she shared that with the head of the DPW, and the head of the DPW felt obliged to tell me that that was a tidal pond, which most of us know, which should have been more reason to post that water as potentially hazardous. I did not follow up with any other dog walkers after that, but it remained unposted. And what was important is they had a dog show that weekend. So I didn't want to have members of the AKC getting upset. Okay, any other notices or changes?
Do you want to vote on the minutes or wait till next month?
No, we have time to vote on the minutes.
Okay, I
Okay.
move that the minutes be approved.
Okay, second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Anyone
Excellent.
opposed?
And finally, let's see. The next meeting is September 7th. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Diane, is that a second? Thank you, Diane. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Bill, did we make it under the wire?
Yes, you did.
Hmm.
Nice job, Joe. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
See you in September.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Night.